At 11 minutes past 4 on a black wet morning, Sergeant Halden Rook laid his open hand flat on the bonnet of a moving motor car, and the motor car stopped. I want that written down exactly as it happened, because in the months since, a great many people have told the story with improvements. They have him drawing a weapon, they have him shouting. He did none of that. He walked out from under the lamp at the barrier hut with rain running off the peak of his cap, put one white gloved palm down on the wet black bonnet of a car that was still rolling, and held it there. The car stopped. It stopped the way a horse stops for a man it knows. Then he said, loudly enough to carry over the engine and not one word louder, "The King's Bridge, every wheel weighs. Bring her to the stone, please. I am Simon Crail. I have been clerk of the Coldmark crossing for 31 years and weighmaster of the same for 26 of them, and if you have never heard of either office, that is fair, because until that morning neither had anybody else. I am writing this at the request of the Court of Inquiry, in my own hand, at my own table, with the ledger open beside me for the dates. I am told it matters that it be plain. So plain. The Coldmark crossing sits where the realm of Eldermore runs out of ground. The River Vess comes down out of the cold march in a hurry, gray and loud and full of stones, and the only place a wheeled thing can cross it for 40 miles either way is the King's Bridge, a narrow, high-backed, 200-year-old span of gray stone with a hump in the middle like a cat's spine. On the far bank stands the Principality of Vantrev, its customs house painted yellow, its flag wet through most of the year. On this bank stands us, a barrier, a lamp, a guard hut, a stable, my office with its stove and its shelves of ledgers going back to my grandfather's time, and the tonnage stone. The tonnage stone is a weighbridge, a plate of iron set flush into the road 40 feet short of the bridge mouth, joined by a rod and a lever, and a good deal of patient engineering to a brass dial on my office wall. It is the reason the King's Bridge is still standing. That bridge was built for wagons and horses. It was never built for lorries. 60 years ago, a stone hauler with a bad conscience took 18 tons across it in the dark and cracked the third arch, and the realm spent 4 years and a river of money putting it right. And when it was right, the council passed the bridge law. The bridge law is short. I have it by heart, as does every man who has ever served at Coldmark, because it is painted on a board above my desk in letters 2 inches high. No wheeled vehicle shall pass upon the King's Bridge at Coldmark, save it be weighed upon the tonnage stone. No vehicle shall pass whose weight exceeds 12 tons. No vehicle shall pass whose weight exceeds by more than 1 part in 20 the weight declared for it in the crossing ledger. And no vehicle shall pass but by the hand of the weighmaster, who shall enter it, and whose entry shall be the pass. That last clause is the one nobody reads. It is the one that mattered. I will come to it. Understand what I am and what I am not. I am not a brave man. I am a thin, stooped, ink-stained person of 64 with a bad hip and a worse chest, and my whole life has been the writing down of things. Axles, tonnages, cargo names, times. When the Duke of Marenhull's people came through in the spring and shouted at me about a mislaid seal, I apologized for 11 minutes to a man who was in the wrong. Sergeant Rook knew that about me, and in 3 years had never once said it aloud, which is a kind of courtesy that costs a man something. Now the convoy. The first I knew of it was the telephone at 10 past 3, and the voice of Trooper Ant's Kettle on the far picket up the marchway, saying there were lamps coming down out of the pass, a great many of them, moving fast and not stopping. I asked him if they were flying anything. He said they were. Flying what ants? The consort standard, Master Crail, he said, and I heard him swallow. It's her. I put my coat on over my nightshirt. That is the sort of detail the court will not want, but it is true, and I would rather you knew that I met the largest morning of my life in a nightshirt and a coat and my boots on the wrong feet, than that you thought me some kind of officer of romance. At 20 to 4, Sergeant Rook came into my office without knocking, which he had never done, and said, "Master Crail, light the stone." I said, "It's the Queen Consort, Sergeant." "Yes," he said. "Light the stone." So I lit the stone, which is to say I lit the 4 oil lamps on their iron posts around the weighbridge, and I unhooded the great lamp on the barrier, and I opened my office window so I could read the brass dial without leaving my chair, and I took down the crossing ledger and dated the page, and I sharpened 2 pens because my hand shakes and a shaking hand splits a nib. Behind me I heard Rook turning out the watch. There were 7 men at Coldmark that night, all told. 7. It is not a great post. It has never been a great post. Once a month a wool lorry comes through, and twice a year a party of hill walkers who have got themselves lost, and in between there is the rain. They came round the bend at 4 minutes past 4, and I will not pretend I was not frightened by the sight. 4 vehicles. A long black motor car with the standard wet and heavy on its wing, the Consort's, unmistakable, the crowned M in silver on the door. Behind it a second car, smaller, curtained. Behind that a van, a great high box of a thing, dark green, Queen's wardrobe lettered small on the side, a canvas apron laced over the tail, and last a flat lorry under a badly roped tarpaulin, riding low. Before and behind on motorcycles 6 men in plain oiled coats, not guard, not any uniform of the realm, private men. They were not slowing. That is the thing I want in the record. The barrier was down and lit, and a royal guard of the realm stood at it in the rain in scarlet under his black storm cloak, and they were not slowing. Which is when Rook stepped out and put his hand on the bonnet. There is a way of standing that is not a threat and is not a plea, and I have only ever seen it in men who have decided something in advance. Rook stood like that. The lead car's brakes bit, the wet gravel hissed, and the bonnet stopped against his palm with an inch to give, and he did not take a step back to gain that inch. He simply kept his hand where it was, as though he had put it there first and the car had arrived afterwards. The driver's window came down, a hard, clean-shaven face in it, hatless, hair flat with rain. "Move," the man said. "The King's Bridge," said Rook. "Every wheel weighs. Bring her to the stone, please." "Do you know whose car this is?" "I know whose bridge it is," said Rook, and there was nothing in his voice at all. "That is what I remember. There was no relish in it. He might have been reading it off the board above my desk. Bring her to the stone." The rear door of the lead car opened. I had seen the Queen Consort once before, at a distance of perhaps 300 yards, on a hot day at the Marchward Review, and she had been a shape in blue with a hand up. Now she was 8 feet from me, and I could hear her breathing. She was tall. Her coat was black and heavy and beaded with rain across the shoulders, and she wore no hat, and her hair was pinned as though she had done it herself in the dark in a hurry, and one pin was showing. That, more than anything, told me the hour of the world we had walked into. The Queen Consort of Eldermore had pinned her own hair. "Sergeant," she said. Her voice was low and pleasant and reasonable, and it carried like a bell. "What is your name?" "Rook, ma'am. Sergeant, Marchward Company of the King's Royal Guard." "Sergeant Rook. It is 4 in the morning, and it is raining, and I am cold, and I am expected at Vantrev at 7. Raise your barrier." "Ma'am, I can't do that until the vehicles are weighed. It's the bridge law. It's not discretionary, and it isn't mine to set aside." He half turned and gestured, and the gesture was not sharp. It was almost gentle, the way you would show a guest to a chair. "The stone is there, ma'am, 40 feet. It takes 4 minutes a vehicle. You'll be at Vantrev by 6:30. I'm not weighing my motor cars like coal." "Everything weighs, ma'am," said Rook. "The King weighs. He weighed in June, coming back from the shoot. He said it was the only law in the realm that had never once made an exception, and he seemed pleased about it. I had not known that. I looked it up afterwards because I look things up. It is what I am for. It is in the ledger in my own hand. 17 June, 1 motor car, His Majesty, 2 tons 4 CWT, declared 2 tons 4 CWT, passed. I had weighed the King and had not thought about it for a year and a half. The Queen Consort stood in the rain and looked at Sergeant Rook for a long moment. Then she put her hand into her coat and brought out a folded paper and held it out, and did not step forward to hand it to him, so that he had to come to her to take it, which he did without any appearance of minding. "A writ of free passage," she said, "under the chancery. Read it, sergeant, and then raise your barrier, and then go and get dry." He read it under the barrier lamp. He read it twice. I saw his eyes go back up to the top. Then he folded it once and did not give it back. "Master Crail," he called. I came out. I have never wanted less to go anywhere in my life. "Master Crail is clerk and weighmaster of this crossing," Rook said to her, quite formally, as though presenting me at a levee, and I stood there in my coat and my nightshirt and my wrong boots and felt my ears go hot. "Master Crail, this is a writ of free passage, engrossed, sealed with the Chancery's lesser seal and countersigned. Would you look at the countersign, please?" I took it. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to hold the paper against my chest to read it, and I remember the rain going through it, and thinking, if I tear this I will be hanged. The countersign said, "Cassius, Lord Deputy of the Chamberlain." And that was all it said. I have stamped, entered, filed, and cross-referenced instruments of the Crown for 31 years, and there is one thing that a writ of free passage must carry, and it is not the Chancery's lesser seal, and it is not a deputy's hand. A writ of free passage suspends the law of a frontier. It is the Crown reaching out and touching the barrier and lifting it. And a thing that can do that must be signed with the King's own hand. The sign manual, or, in the King's absence from the realm, sealed with the Great Seal and countersigned by the keeper of it. There was no sign manual. There was no Great Seal. There was a Deputy Chamberlain's signature and a lesser seal, which together are enough to let a wagon-load of table linen into a garden party. I heard myself say, in the smallest voice a man has ever used at a frontier, "This isn't right, Sergeant." "No," said Rook, "it isn't. Say why." And because he asked me to say why, I said why. I have thought about that a great deal since. He could have said it himself. He knew. He made me say it out loud in the rain in front of her, and it was the making of me, and I do not think it was kindness. I think it was tactics. A man who has said a thing out loud has to go on standing next to it. "It wants the King's hand, ma'am," I said. "A free passage wants the King's hand. Lord Cassius can't give it. Nobody can give it but him." The Queen Consort turned her head and looked at me, and I saw her decide in about a second and a half exactly what I was. A clerk, 64, frightened, replaceable. "Then it is a defect of form," she said, "and I will have it corrected at my leisure, and you will not be at this crossing next month. Sergeant, my barrier." "Ma'am," said Rook, "with the writ good I'd raise it and wish you a fair road. With the writ defective I've nothing to raise it on but the bridge law, and the bridge law says way." He held the paper out to her, and she did not take it, so he laid it, folded, on the wet black wing of her car, where it began at once to darken and swell. 4 minutes a vehicle. "Please bring them to the stone." Behind her, one of the plain-coated men had come off his motorcycle and was walking up. He was a wide, soft-footed man of 50 or so with a face like a closed drawer, and I knew him, because he had come through Coldmark twice in the last year on the consort's business, and had both times been very polite to me, and left me feeling I had been counted. Quillan Sar, steward of the consort's household. "Ma'am," he said, "shall I have the barrier up?" And Rook said, "And this is the whole of the man, and I have never forgotten it, Mr. Sar. There are 7 of us at this post and 6 of you, and the barrier is oak and the bridge is stone, and the river is in flood. If you touch the barrier I will arrest you, and if your men touch the barrier I will arrest them, and then I will still have to weigh the vehicles, and everybody will be much colder and much later. Bring them to the stone." Sar looked at him for a moment. He had the sort of eyes that add up. "Weigh them," said the Queen Consort. And the first car came onto the stone, and I went into my dial and my ledger, and the night, so far as I was concerned, properly began. The lead car, 2 tons 11 CWT declared 2 tons 12. Good. The second car, 2 tons 3 CWT declared 2 tons 2. Good. Through the curtain of that one I saw a pale young face, Lady Verena, the consort's daughter, upright under a traveling rug, looking straight ahead and not at me. She did not look frightened. She looked bored, which I thought at the time a remarkable thing to be at 4 in the morning at a frontier in the rain, and which I have since come to understand quite differently. She had been told this would take 20 minutes. The flat lorry, 5 tons 9 CWT declared 5 tons 10. Ropes badly set, tarpaulin sagging but good. Then the van. The green van, the high box, Queen's wardrobe in small gold letters, came up onto the tonnage stone and settled, and the plate went down under it with the deep iron sigh it makes when it is being asked a serious question. I put my hand on the dial case and watched the needle come round. The manifest in a clerk's copperplate, which I had copied into my ledger 4 minutes before, read, 1 van, wardrobe, gowns and personal apparel, cases and hanging chests. 3 tons 6 CWT. The needle went past 3 tons. It went past 3 tons 6. It kept going. It went past 4 tons, and I could hear the rain on the roof and my own heart in my ears, and it went past 4 tons 10, and it slowed the way the needle does at the end, creeping and stopped and trembled and stayed. 4 tons, 17 hundredweight. 11 hundredweight and a half over the declaration, more than half a ton, in a van full of dresses. I did the sum 3 times. Then I did something I have not done since I was a boy of 19 and dropped a customs seal into the vest. I went out into the rain without my hat. "Sergeant," I said. Rook was standing at the tail of the van with the rain coming off him. He looked at my face, and he did not ask me the figure. He asked me a different question, and it was the right one, and I have thought since that everything that followed was already in it. "How much cloth?" he said. "Would you have to put in a box that size, Master Crail, to make it weigh half a ton more than it says?" "You couldn't," I said. "You'd, Sergeant, you couldn't, not if you packed it wet, not if you packed it in sand." "No," he said. He turned and looked at the van for a while. Rain drummed on the canvas apron. Behind us the lead car idled, and the Queen Consort stood beside it, not moving, watching us both, and the 6 plain-coated men had drifted, not obviously, into a line between the van and the barrier. "Master Crail," said Sergeant Rook, "read me the 4th clause." I did not need the board. I said it into the rain. "And no vehicle shall pass but by the hand of the weighmaster, who shall enter it, and whose entry shall be the pass." "Whose hand?" he said. I looked at him. The lamp was behind him, and I could not see his face at all, only the shape of him, the cloak, the shoulders, the wet peak of the cap. "Mine," I said. "Yes," said Rook. "Now go and stand by your dial, and don't sign anything." What happened over the next hour was not a search, and I want the court very clear on that, because it is the ground the consort's advocates fought hardest for and the ground they lost on. Sergeant Rook never searched the Queen Consort. He had no cause to, and he knew it, and he said so aloud 4 times that morning. What he had was a van at a weighbridge that was half a ton heavier than its own paper, on a bridge that cracks, under a law that gave him no discretion whatsoever. He stood on that and never once stepped off it. Months later, in a warm room at Harrogate, clever men spent 2 days trying to make him say he had suspected her of theft, and he would not say it, and they could not make him. "I had a van over its declaration," he said. "The law told me what to do with it. I did that. But I am ahead of myself." At 4:30 the Queen Consort came and stood in the doorway of my office. I was at the dial. She filled the doorway with the rain behind her and looked round at my shelves, 31 years of ledgers, brown and swollen with damp, and at my stove, and at me, and she smiled, and it was a good smile. That is the part people never believe. She was not a snarling woman. She was extremely good company for about 90 seconds at a time. "Master Crail, you are a careful man." She came in and put her fingertips on my table and read the ledger upside down without any difficulty. 4 tons 17. "Is that a great deal?" "It's 11.5 hundredweight over, ma'am." "And that is a great deal." "It's more than a small horse, ma'am," I said, and I do not know why I said it, and she laughed, and I felt myself flush with a horrible eagerness to be laughed at again, and I have not forgiven myself for it yet. "Then a fool of a packer has blundered, and I shall find him and be very disagreeable to him. In the meantime, look where we are." She lifted a hand at the window, the black, the rain, the lamps, the bridge, the far yellow smear of the Van Treff Customs House. "You have a van that is heavy. I have a road to be at the end of. There is no crime in a heavy van. What would you like me to do?" And she waited, and it was a real question, and God help me, I nearly answered it. I nearly said, "Leave the van on the verge, ma'am, and go on with your cars." The reasonable thing, the sensible administrative solution. It would have cost the realm the Great Seal and the king his throne and most likely his life, and I would have signed it in my best hand and gone back to bed pleased with myself. The only reason I did not is that Sergeant Rook had told me to stand by my dial and sign nothing, and I am a man who does what he is told, and for once in my life that was a virtue. "I'd like to see inside the van, ma'am," I said, "for the entry, so I can write down what's in it." The smile did not go. It simply stopped meaning anything, the way a lamp stops meaning anything when the flame is out but the glass is still hot. "No," she said. She left. She did not slam the door. She pulled it to behind her with great care, and that was worse. Captain Idris Thorne arrived at 10 to 5, down from the marchward post 6 miles up the valley, his coat buttoned wrong and his face the color of paper. He is, a decent officer with 11 years in, and a wife and a house he is paying for, and he had been woken to be told that his sergeant had put his hand on the Queen Consort's car. He came into the lamplight already talking. Rook, tell me you have not." He stopped. He looked at the 4 vehicles, and at the van still standing on the tonnage stone because Rook had not let it come off, and at the 6 plain-coated men, and at the tall woman by the lead car with her hair coming down in the rain, and he took his cap off to her and put it back on. Then he turned to Rook and dropped his voice, and I heard every word of it, because the wind was off the river and I was 10 feet away pretending to fill a lamp. "What is the position?" "Van's 11.5 hundredweight over its declaration, sir. Writ of free passage is defective, deputy's countersign, no sign manual. Everything else weighed clean." "Over its declaration. Rook, that's a clerical fault. That's a asterisk fine asterisk. We fine wool haulers for that, 4 crowns and a black mark, and off they go." "We fine them," Rook agreed, "when they tell us what's in it and the weight comes right. This one won't tell us what's in it." "It's gowns, Sergeant." "Then she can open the tail and let Master Crail count the gowns," said Rook. "And I'll be the biggest fool at this crossing, and I'll say so in front of the men, and she'll be over the bridge in 10 minutes. Thorne stood in the rain and rubbed his face with both hands, and I felt sorry for him then, and I have gone on feeling sorry for him since, because he did nothing wrong that morning except be afraid, and being afraid is not a crime, and he was afraid in exactly the way 99 men in 100 would have been. "Do you know what she can do to you?" he said. "To me, Rook, I have it." He stopped himself. He was not a small enough man to finish it. "There is a way of doing this that does not end with all of us finished." "There might be, sir," said Rook. "I can't find it. The law is 4 lines long." And then the telephone rang. The cold-marked telephone is on the wall of my office. It rings perhaps twice a week. The Marchward Post, the wool factor at Vesford, once a year a wrong number from a hotel. It rang at 3 minutes past 5 with a violence that went through me like a nail. I picked it up. Thorne came in behind me and Rook behind him and shut the door, and the three of us stood in that small hot room with the stove ticking, and I said, "Coldmark Crossing, Crail speaking," and a voice a very long way off, thin and crackling and cultivated, said, "Put me on to the officer commanding." I handed it to Thorn. Thorn gave his name. Then he said, "Yes, sir." Then, "Yes, sir," again, and then nothing at all for the better part of a minute, and I watched the color come up his throat into his face, and when he spoke again his voice had gone flat and careful. "May I ask who is speaking, sir?" The voice said something. "I understand that, sir. May I ask who is speaking?" The voice said something longer, and Thorn closed his eyes. "Sir," he said, "with respect, I am being ordered to open a frontier by a man on a wire. I can't do that on a wire. If the king's pleasure is that the convoy passes, let it come down under his hand or under the chancery seal by a rider, and I will have the barrier up inside the minute and apologize on my knees. But I cannot lift a frontier because a telephone tells me to." He was shaking when he said it. I want that in the record too. He was shaking, and he said it anyway, and afterwards he leaned on my table with both hands and breath like a man who has carried something heavy up a hill. The voice went on for some time. Then Thorn said, "Yes, he is here," and held the telephone out to Sergeant Rook. Rook took it. He did not put it to his ear at once. He looked at it the way you look at a dog you have not been introduced to. Then he said, "Rook." I could hear the shape of the voice, not the words. "Arise, a fall, arise." Rook listened all the way through and did not interrupt. When it stopped, he said, "Sir, I'm not refusing an order. I'm asking for it in a form I'm allowed to obey. Send it under seal and I'll obey it." The voice again, short and hard. "Yes, sir," said Rook. "Then I'll take the consequences of that. Coldmark out." He put the telephone back on its hook and stood there with his hand on it for a moment. Then he said, to nobody in particular, "Master Crail, what time did Lord Cassius cross?" I did not have to look. I had entered it myself, 4 hours before, half asleep, and it had meant nothing to me at the time, and it had been sitting at the back of my head ever since like a stone in a boot. 2 minutes past 3, Sergeant," I said. "Lord Cassius, 1 motorcar, black driver and himself, 2 tons even, nothing declared, empty." "Empty," said Rook. "Empty," I said. "He went over empty and he didn't come back." There was a silence in my office. The stove ticked. Outside, one of the motorcycles started and stopped. "An hour ahead," said Rook slowly, "with an empty car to the far side. And he's sitting over there now in the yellow customs house in the warm, waiting for something." He looked up. "Sir, that was Lord Cassius on the telephone." "You don't know that," said Thorn. "No, sir," said Rook. "I don't. But he's a mile away across a river and he's got a telephone, and the man on that wire didn't know how many vehicles were in the convoy. He said the cars. There's a van and a lorry." Thorn sat down slowly on my stool. He looked at the board above my desk with the bridge law painted on it, and he read it, I think properly, for the first time in 11 years. "Sergeant," he said, "I want to be very sure of what we are saying." "We're not saying anything, sir," said Rook. "That's the point. I'm not saying she's a thief, and I'm not going to. I've got a van over its weight and a writ that's no good, and I've got the law. I'd like to go on standing on the law and not 1 inch off it, because the moment I step off it, everything we do here is spite, and they'll bury us with it." He picked up his cap from my table and put it on and straightened it. "Master Crail," he said, "the van is on the stone and it is over. Under the bridge law, what happens to a vehicle that is over?" I said, "It doesn't pass." And I understood then what he had been walking me towards for an hour, and I sat down rather suddenly on the corner of my own table, and the ledger slid, and I caught it. "And it's unladen at the line," I said, "Clause 5. A vehicle exceeding its declaration shall be unladen upon the ground at the crossing and its lading weighed and entered severally, and the vehicle weighed empty, before it shall pass or be turned back. Severally, said Rook, meaning. Meaning piece by piece, I said. Meaning I write down every single thing that comes out of that van and what it weighs, and I sign for it. That's not a search, said Rook. No, I said, it's an unlading. Would you say that again, please, sir, in front of the captain? It is not a search, I said. It is an unlading. It's Sergeant, it's arithmetic, she can't refuse it. Nobody can refuse it, it's how we settle the weight. Captain Thorne put his head in his hands. Oh, God have mercy, he said quite mildly. You're going to unpack the Queen Consort's wardrobe on the road in the rain. No, sir, said Rook. Master Crail is, I'm going to stand next to him. She took it better than I expected, and that frightened me more than anything she had done yet. Rook told her at the barrier in the rain, with Thorne beside him and me half a step behind holding the ledger against my chest like a shield. He had copied Clause 5 out onto a page of my scrap paper in a slow, clear hand, and he gave it to her, and she read it twice. How long? 2 hours, ma'am, if your people help us, 4 if they don't. And at the end of it? At the end of it we know what the van weighs and what's in it, said Rook. And if it's gowns, the manifest gets corrected, the fine gets paid, and you cross. 4 crowns, ma'am, it's a 4-crown fine. 4 crowns, she repeated. Yes, ma'am. She stood there. The rain had got into her coat properly now, and it hung on her heavy and black, and her hair was down on one side, and she was not, at that moment, a queen consort at all. She was a tall woman on a road at 5 in the morning with 3 vehicles behind her and a river in front of her, and she was thinking. I have gone over that pause many times, and I believe I know what was in it. She could not take the van back up the valley. The marchway is single track for 4 miles. Thorne's men were on it, and a van ordered unladen at a frontier that then runs is a van that has confessed. She could have left it and gone on with her cars, and she nearly did. But you cannot leave the great seal of the realm, standing on a weighbridge in the rain, in the care of a clerk. Very well, she said, unlade it. And she turned and walked back to her car and got in and shut the door and did not come out again for 2 hours, and through the window I could see the shape of her, upright, not smoking, not reading, not sleeping, just sitting, waiting for the far side of the river to do something. I have to tell you now about Sergeant Rook, because the court asked me to, and because you cannot understand what he did at 6 o'clock unless you know what had been done to him at 19 minutes past 9 on a morning 3 years before. I did not learn it from him, he never spoke of it. I learned it that morning from her, because she told the whole crossing. It was about 5:30. The unlading had begun. Lance Corporal Pethlock and Trooper Ance Kettle had the tail of the van open and the canvas apron rolled, and they were bringing out hanging chests, big cedar cases, 5 feet high with brass corners, and standing them under a tarpaulin we had rigged off the stable roof, and I was weighing each one on the hand scale and entering it. Chest, cedar, brass-bound, 1 CWT 3QR4 LB. Contained 6 gowns, silk, 1 gown, velvet, hangers, tissue. Slow, cold, stupid work. Rook stood at the tail of the van with his hands behind his back and watched every single thing that came out of it, and said nothing at all. And the Queen Consort's window came down, and she said, across 40 feet of rain, in that carrying, pleasant voice, "Do you know why he is here, Master Crail?" I did not answer. I went on weighing. He was Sergeant Major of the Inner Guard, she said. 3 years ago. Household. The best posting in the realm. Do you know why a Sergeant Major of the Inner Guard is a sergeant on a bridge in the mountains? Locke had stopped moving. Kettle had stopped. Rook stood at the tail of the van with his hands behind his back and looked at the wet road. Because he would not open a door for me, she said. Nobody said anything. The rain came down. The late Queen's apartments, she said, sealed, full of dust and dead flowers and her cupboards. I asked him to open the door. I was the queen consort of Eldermore, and I asked a sergeant major to open a door in my own house, and he told me the seal was the chamberlain's and he would want the chamberlain's word. And I told him that I was giving him the word, and he said, she paused, and she did it well. She had a real gift. He said, ma'am, that isn't a word I can take. She let that sit. He was broken from sergeant major to sergeant within the month, she said, and posted to the Cold March, which is where the guard sends men it wants to forget. He has stood on this bridge for 3 years in the rain. And now, Master Crail, look at him. Look at him standing there, so upright, so correct, weighing my dresses. Do you imagine that this is about a van? And Sergeant Rook lifted his head and said, quite pleasantly, Corporal Locke next chest. That was all. He did not defend himself. He did not look at her. He did not deny one word of it, and every word of it was true, and I confirmed it afterwards from the company's book. Rook H. reduced sergeant major to sergeant. Conduct. Refusal of a lawful instruction from a member of the royal family. Posted. Marchward Company, Coldmark, 3 lines, a career. But here is the thing she had not thought about, and it is the thing I think about now on nights when I cannot sleep. She had put him there. Of all the roads out of the realm of Eldermore, there is one that a heavy vehicle can take in the dark without going near a city, and it comes down out of the Cold March and over the King's Bridge at Coldmark, and standing on it, in the rain, at 4 in the morning, was the one man in the realm she had personally made certain would never, ever open a door for her. 3 years ago she had reached out and set him down in the exact spot where she would one day need him not to be. I do not call that justice. Justice is a thing men do. I do not know what to call it. I only know that when I finally understood it, standing in the rain with a pen in my hand, I laughed out loud, and Trooper Kettle asked me if I was quite well. By 6 o'clock we had 41 hanging chests, 22 cases, 9 hat boxes, and a rolled carpet out of that van, and standing under the tarpaulin, every one weighed and entered, and the sum in my ledger came to 3 tons, 200 weight and 11 pounds. The van, declared at 3 tons 6, had weighed 4 tons 17. Its lading on the ground weighed 3 tons 2, which meant the empty van should weigh 1 ton 15. I walked out to the tonnage stone with my hat in my hand. Rook was already there, and the empty van was on the plate, and the needle said what I had known it would say from the moment I did the sum. 2 tons 1300 weight. An empty wardrobe van, with nothing whatever in it, weighing 1800 weight more than an empty wardrobe van weighs. Sergeant, I said, I know. There's most of a ton in that van that isn't in that van. I know, Master Crail. He walked up the ramp into the empty box of it, and I followed, and it was dark and very loud with the rain on the roof, and it smelled of cedar and lavender and cold metal. He got down on his knees with his lamp and went along the boards tapping, and it was all the same dull sound, dull, 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 until it was not. It rang. He tapped again. It rang again. He sat back on his heels and set the lamp down, and in its light I saw that floor properly for the first time. How new the boards were, how the screw heads were bright and unpainted, how the whole floor sat a good 4 inches higher than the wheelarch said it ought to. Master Crail, he said, what does Clause 5 say I do with a vehicle that is still over its weight when it's empty? I had to hold the door frame. You unlaid it, I said, until it isn't. Quillan Sar made his attempt at 20 past 6, and I have to give him this. It was the cleverest thing anybody tried all day, and it very nearly worked, and it was not violent, and it was not stupid. He came to me. Not to Rook, not to Thorne. To me in my office, where I was writing up the entries with my hands so cold I could hardly hold the pen. He came in with 2 cups of coffee from the consort's own flask, put one at my elbow, sat on the stool across from me like an old friend, and looked at the ledger. Master Crail, you're the only man here who understands what's happening. I doubt that, Mr. Sar. No, you are. The captain wants it over. The sergeant wants to win. You're the only one who's read the book." He turned the ledger gently round with one finger and looked at my figures and nodded as though approving a piece of joinery. "Beautiful hand. My father was a clerk, excise on the coast, 40 years, and he died in a rented room." I said nothing. "I think there's a false floor in that van," said Sar, "and I think you know it, and I think in a little while the sergeant is going to take a crowbar to it. And I want you to think very carefully about what happens next, because you are the man whose name will be on it." He tapped the ledger. "That's your hand, not his. He's a soldier. He'll say he followed the law and they'll believe him and put him back in the rain. But you asterisk, Master Crail, you will have written it, every line. And when this goes to Harrogate, there will be a room full of men in wigs, and they will not be arguing about the bridge law. They will be arguing about asterisk, you asterisk. Who is this clerk? What has he got against Her Majesty? Why did a man of 64 with a bad chest decide, at 4 in the morning, to take the Queen Consort's wardrobe apart on a public road?" He let me sit with that. Then he said very kindly, "There's a chancery clerkship at Harrogate, grade 3, warm rooms, a pension that isn't a joke. I could have your name on the list by Thursday, and you would never see the cold march again, and all it wants is that you put your pen down, write manifest corrected in transit, take the 4-crown fine, and go to bed." And I sat there. I would like to tell the court that I refused at once. I did not. I sat a long time in the warm with another man's coffee going cold at my elbow, and I thought about my rooms and my chest and my grandfather's ledgers going brown on the shelf, and I thought, he is right. It will be about me. They will take me apart. And then I thought about a man in a doorway 3 years ago, asked to open a door, saying, "Ma'am, that isn't a word I can take," and sent to a bridge in the mountains for it, and standing on it for 3 years in the rain without once complaining, and putting his hand flat on a moving car at 4 in the morning because a law painted on a board said every wheel weighs. I closed the ledger. "Mr. Sar," I said, "I'm the weighmaster of this crossing. Nothing goes over that bridge but by my hand. And I haven't got a weight for that van yet." Sar looked at me for a moment. Then he stood up and buttoned his coat, and he was not angry. He was something much worse. He was sorry for me. "Then God help you," he said, "because nobody else will." And he went out into the rain and shut the door softly, and I put my head down on the closed ledger and stayed like that until I could hold a pen. They took the floor up at 7 in the gray, with the rain gone thin and the mountains showing black over the pass. I stood in the door of the van with the ledger and the hand scale, and Captain Idris Thorne stood beside me with his jaw set, and he had made his choice, and I saw him make it, and he never went back on it, not once, not even when they offered him a way out. Corporal Locke had the screwdriver. There were 68 screws. He took them out one at a time, and I entered them, screws, brass, countersunk, 68, because Rook said, "Enter everything, Master Crail. They'll fight us on every nail." And he was right, and they did, and my 68 screws are in the record of the High Court of Eldermore, where an advocate spent 2 hours on them and lost. At the 18th screw, Lady Verena got out of the second car. She came and stood at the foot of the ramp in her traveling coat with her arms folded, 17 years old, watching Locke work, and she said to nobody, "You're all going to hang." Nobody answered her. "You know that, don't you?" she said, and her voice went up and cracked, and that was the moment I stopped being frightened of any of them, because I heard in that crack a girl who had been told this would take 20 minutes, who had now stood at a frontier for 3 hours watching men count her mother's dresses in the rain, and who had begun, somewhere in the last hour, to be afraid of the answer to a question she had never thought to ask. "Miss," said Sergeant Rook without turning round, "you'll be warmer in the car." She stayed. She stayed for all of it. And whatever else is true of that family, I will say this in the record, and it can go where it likes. Lady Verena did not know. She did not know until the boards came up. And when they came up, she made a sound I have not been able to forget. and sat down on the wet ramp of a wardrobe van in a good coat with her hands over her mouth. Because under those boards there was no cloth at all. There was a bed of sacking, and set into it, bolted through to the chassis with new bright bolts, there were 3 things. The first was an iron press, 3 feet high, black, squat, a screw press with a great 4-armed wheel on top, very old and very well kept, with a smear of red wax dried on the platen like a scab. I knew what it was the moment the lamp went over it, and so did Rook. And so, from the doorway, did Captain Thorne, and none of us said the word for 10 seconds. A seal press. The kind that stands in a locked room in the chancery at Harrogate with a soldier outside the door. That is used perhaps 40 times a year, and that has not left the building it stands in for 200 years. The second was a wooden case, banded, the size of a large book with a rope handle, locked and extremely heavy for its size. The third was a flat iron strongbox, 3 feet by 2, painted black, with a brass plate, and stamped into the plate was the crowned portcullis of the Chancery of Eldermore. And across the lid, holding down the hasp, was a broad ribbon of green silk, and where the ribbon crossed itself there was a disc of hard red wax the size of a crown piece, and the wax was stamped with the lesser seal of the Chancery, and it was whole, unbroken, perfect. Nobody moved. The rain came down on the roof of the van, and the river went on grinding away at its stones below the bridge, and I stood there in the door with my ledger and my hand scale and my 68 screws, and I heard Captain Thorne say, in a voice that had nothing left in it, "Sergeant, put the floor back. I want to be scrupulous here, because Captain Thorne has been badly used in the newspapers, and he does not deserve it." He was right. That is the thing nobody wants to hear. Under the law of the realm as it stood at 7 o'clock that morning, Captain Idris Thorne was right, and Sergeant Halden Rook was in the gravest danger of his life, and everybody in that van knew it. Because there is a rule older than the bridge law, and it is a good rule, and I have upheld it 100 times myself. The papers of state must be able to travel. A frontier officer who can open a sealed chancery chest can read the realm's treaties, its cipher, its army's dispositions. So the law says, in 8 words any clerk of the frontier can recite in his sleep. A chest of the chancery, sealed, passeth unopened. Not may pass asterisk, passeth. It is not a discretion, it is a command laid on the officer at the line. To break that seal in transit is not zeal, it is a felony, and men have gone to prison for it. And she had known it from the first minute. That is the part that took the breath out of me afterwards, when I had leisure to be sick about it. She had not been afraid of the weighbridge. She had been irritated by it. She had let us take 41 hanging chests out of that van in the rain and had sat in her car and watched, because she knew with complete certainty that when we got to the bottom of it we would find a sealed chancery chest, and would have to put it back and screw the floor down and touch our caps and raise the barrier. The van was not hiding the chest. The van was carrying the chest. The chest hid itself, and the seal on it was the safest thing in the realm. She got out of her car. She came up the road in the rain, unhurried now, and she stood at the foot of the ramp beside her white-faced daughter, and she looked up into the van at the 3 of us, and at the black iron box with the green ribbon and the perfect red wax. "Well," she said. Nobody spoke. "Sergeant Rook," said the Queen Consort, "you have been very thorough, and it has been very tiresome, and I am wet through. Now put the floor back." Rook stood looking down at the strongbox. He had a face made for exactly this and nothing else, a long, plain, weathered face that gave away not one thing. But I was 3 feet from him, and I saw his hands. He had them behind his back, and the knuckles were white. "Ma'am," he said, "may I see the warrant of carriage?" And there, in that one sentence, at 4 minutes past 7 on that gray morning, on the floor of a wardrobe van in the rain, is where the realm of Eldermore turned over. She did not answer at once. "I beg your pardon," she said. "The warrant of carriage, ma'am," said Rook. "A sealed chest of the Chancery passes unopened, yes, ma'am, it does, and I'd never lay a finger on it. But it doesn't pass by asterisk being a sealed chest. It passes on its warrant. Every chest of state that leaves Harrogate travels under a warrant of carriage that names the chest, names the road, and names the bearer, and it's entered at every line it crosses, and the bearer signs the entry. That's not the bridge law, ma'am. That's the Chancery's own rule, and it exists to protect the Chancery. I've had 6 through this crossing in 3 years." He turned his head very slightly. "Master Crail, have we had a warrant of carriage entered tonight?" I opened the ledger with hands that had gone completely steady, which surprised me very much. "No, Sergeant, and no chest of the Chancery has been declared at this crossing tonight. The van was declared as gowns and personal apparel. There is no chest of state on any manifest of this convoy. No warrant. No bearer named. Nobody has signed anything." Sergeant Rook looked back down at the Queen Consort of Eldermore, standing at the foot of the ramp in the rain, in her ruined coat, with her hair down. "Then this isn't a chest of the Chancery, ma'am. Whatever it is, it's traveling with no warrant, on no manifest, under a floor, in a van declared as dresses that is 1,800 weight over its own weight with nothing in it, on a defective writ signed by a man who crossed this bridge 4 hours ago in an empty car, and is sitting in the Vantrev Customs House waiting for it." He let out a breath. "It's not state papers, ma'am, it's cargo, and cargo gets weighed." She fought. Of course she fought. She was never a fool and never a coward, and she stood in that rain for 11 minutes and fought him with everything she had. She told him he was not a lawyer. He agreed. She told him the Chancery seal was on that box, and that any man who broke it was finished, imprisoned, disgraced, whatever his reasons and however right he turned out to be. He agreed with that too. It was true, and it is the reason nobody had ever done it. She told him that if he was wrong, if that box held nothing but dull letters to Vantrev, he would go to prison and Thorn with him, and I with them both, an old man, for the rest of my short life, and the realm would say we had deserved it. And Rook said, "Yes, ma'am, I think that's right." "Then put the floor back," she said, and her voice cracked exactly as her daughter's had, and she was so close and so tall and so terrible that I thought she would strike him. "Put the floor back, you stubborn, ruined man, and go and stand in the rain for the rest of your life, and let me go home." "Ma'am," said Sergeant Rook, "you're not going home. Home is behind you." And that stopped her. She had come 6 hours down a mountain in the dark with her daughter and her steward and half a ton of iron under her dresses, and a sergeant on a bridge told her, quite gently, which way home was, and she had no answer for it. "Captain Thorn," said Rook without turning round. "Sergeant." "Sir, I'm going to ask you to do the hardest thing anyone's asked you today. I'm going to ask you not to give me an order." Thorn stood in the doorway of that van for a long moment. "Explain that," he said. "If you order me to open it, sir, and I'm wrong, they hang it on you and you've a wife and a house. If you order me not to open it, I'll obey you, because you're my officer, and that box will be in Vantrev by 8, and whatever's in it will do whatever it was built to do, and neither of us will ever know what we let across. And if I say nothing—" "Then it's the Waymaster's," said Rook. "It always was. Read the law, sir. It's not the guard that passes a load at Coldmark, and it's not the captain. Clause 4. No vehicle shall pass but by the hand of the Waymaster, who shall enter it, and whose entry shall be the pass. This is a weight question, sir, and there's only one man at this crossing the law lets answer it." And all 3 of them, the captain, the sergeant, and the Queen Consort of Eldermore, turned and looked at me. At me, Simon Crail, 64 years old, in a nightshirt and a coat and my boots on the wrong feet, holding a ledger. The court has asked me twice, kindly but twice, how I came to my decision, and whether I suspected what was in the box. I had no suspicion at all. If I had guessed what was in it, I should have fainted, and I am not being funny. I did not open it because I knew. I opened it because of a number. An empty van should weigh 1 ton 15. That van, empty, weighed 2 tons 13. The press, when we got it out onto my scale, weighed 600 weight 2 quarters. The banded case, 100 weight 1 quarter and 11 pounds. That left 10 hundredweight and change unaccounted for, and there was only one thing left under that floor, and it was 3 feet by 2 and made of iron. A frontier is not a place of opinions. It is a place of sums. My sum did not come out, and until my sum came out, nothing crossed my bridge. That is the whole of my reasoning. It is the reasoning of a small man, and I am not ashamed of it any more. I said, "Sergeant, I can't weigh a box I can't see into. It might be lead. It might be feathers. Until I know what's in it, I can't enter it. And until I enter it, it doesn't pass." And the Queen Consort said quietly, "Master Crail, you are about to destroy yourself." "Yes, ma'am," I said, "very probably." And then, because I am a coward, and a coward wants a witness the way a drowning man wants a rope, I said the only clever thing I said all day. "Sergeant, fetch the Vantrev man." Inspector Hesper Dane of the Vantrev Customs was a small, dry, sardonic person of about 50 who had been standing on his own bank in a yellow oilskin since 5:30, watching us through field glasses, because it was the most entertaining morning of his professional life. He came over the bridge under the barrier with his hands in his pockets and looked at the press, and at the case, and at the black iron chest with the green ribbon and the perfect wax, and took his pipe out of his mouth. "Well," he said in his flat Cold Hills accent, "well, well." "Inspector," I said, "you are a foreign officer. I have no authority over you, and you owe this realm nothing. I am going to open that chest. I would like you to stand there and watch me do it and remember what you see." Dane looked at me for a while. Then he put his pipe back in his mouth, folded his arms, and set his back against the wall of the van. "I will watch," he said. "And Master Crail, for what it is worth, which is nothing, since I am a foreigner, my principality has been asked, 3 times this month, by a gentleman in a very good coat, to open our chancery at 7 o'clock this morning, and have the prince's notary standing by to register an instrument of Eldermore. And we said yes, because we are poor, and he offered a great deal of money. And I have been standing over there since 5:30 wondering what on earth could be so heavy." The Queen Consort said, "Inspector Dane, you will hold your tongue." "Ma'am," said Dane, "I am 90 feet inside Eldermore, and I am not your subject, and my pension is not in your gift, and I have wanted to say that to somebody for 30 years. He nodded at me. "Open your box, Waymester." Sergeant Rook broke the seal of the Chancery of Eldermore at 19 minutes past 7 in the morning, with a screwdriver on the ramp of a wardrobe van, in the rain, in front of a captain of the Royal Guard, a foreign customs inspector, 2 troopers, the Queen Consort, her daughter, her steward, and me. He did it slowly. He cut the green ribbon, and he did not tear the wax off. He cut around it and lifted the wax disc off hole on the point of the screwdriver, and he handed it to me and said, "Enter it. Seal, Chancery Lesser, intact upon opening, taken up whole and preserved." Which I did, and which is why the wax is Exhibit 4, and why the defense could not say we had broken it and stamped it again. Then he put his hands on the lid and looked at me. "Master Crail," he said, "this is my act, not yours, not the captain's. Say it back to me." "It's your act," I said. "Good," he said, and he opened the lid. The first thing was cloth, folded, a great length of white silk, clean and dry. Under the silk was a shallow tray of molded felt, and set into the felt, filling it, black bright, was a disc of silver about 7 inches across, and it was cut in reverse, and the cutting was deep and old and beautiful, and any man in that realm would have known it, because it is stamped on every law and every charter and every pardon and every treaty Eldermore has made in 240 years, and it is on the wall of every courthouse and every school. and I have a paper impression of it hanging in a frame in my own office, given to me at 25 years of service. The Great Seal of the Realm, the Silver Matrix. Captain Idris Thorne took his cap off. I do not think he knew he had done it. He simply took his cap off and stood there bareheaded in the rain like a man at a graveside. Inspector Dane said something short in the language of Vantrev, and then, in ours, "That does not leave a country. That has never left a country." Under the tray were the papers. I lifted them out one by one and entered them one by one, and my handwriting on that page of the ledger is not my handwriting. It is the hand of somebody else, somebody younger and much more frightened, and the ink is smeared in 3 places by rain, and the court has the page. Item, 400 sheets of warrant stock, heavy cream paper, gilt-edged, watermarked with the crowned portcullis. The blank paper of the crown, the stuff a warrant is written on, counted sheet by sheet in the chancery and signed for. Item, the banded case, which Rook opened with the screwdriver because we had gone past caring, 11 sticks of vermilion sealing wax, a spirit lamp, a ladle, and 2 lead blanks of the sort used for a leaden bulla in the old form, for an instrument that is meant to last. Item, a leather folio, tied with tape. Item, a small black memorandum book, octavo, half-bound, much used. Item, 1 envelope unsealed, of ordinary size. Rook untied the folio. Inside was a single sheet of engrossed vellum, written out beautifully in a professional chancery hand, and it was headed, "An Instrument of Regency." And it recited, in the long, slow, courteous, murderous language of these things, that whereas His Majesty King Alaric of Eldermore was by infirmity of body and mind become unable to exercise the royal office, and whereas the Crown Prince Rowan was absent upon the northern progress, therefore the government of the realm, and the custody of the king's person, and the exercise of the royal authority in all things, was vested in Her Majesty the Queen Consort Morwenna, as regent, during His Majesty's indisposition, and until such time as she should declare it ended. Until such time as she should declare it ended. At the foot of it, on the right, was a signature. Alaric R**. His hand. I have seen the King's sign manual 200 times in 31 years, and I know the way the A goes up and the R comes down and the little sharp tick he puts after it like a man snapping a pen shut. It was his hand. It was not a forgery. I said so out loud, standing in that van, and I have said so on oath since, and the Crown's own examiners said so after 4 months of work. The King of Eldermore signed that instrument himself. And on the left, where the great red wheel of the Great Seal goes, the seal that turns a piece of vellum into the will of a nation. There was nothing, blank vellum, waiting. That is what the press was for, and the wax and the lead blanks. That is what the 7 o'clock appointment across the river was for, and the prince's notary, and the register of the chancery of Vantrev, and the Concord of the 2 rivers. A treaty 300 years old that nobody thinks about, which says in Article 9 that an instrument of either realm, once registered in the chancery of the other, shall be received in the courts of both as authentic, and shall not be impeached save by proof of forgery. Not questioned asterisk, not reviewed, received as authentic. She was going to seal it in Vantrev, with the true seal, under the true signature, and bring it back over that bridge at noon, sealed and registered and unimpeachable, and be regent of Eldermore by tea time. And every court in the realm would have been bound to take it as good, because the paper was good, and the signature was good, and the seal was asterisk good asterisk, and the only thing wrong with it in the whole wide world was that the king had never read it. "How," said Captain Thorne, his voice had gone very strange, "how did she get his hand on it?" And Rook, who had picked up the little black memorandum book, said, "Sir, it's all in here." It was a very tidy book. It was the book of a woman who was good at her work. Payments in 2 columns over 14 months, names in full. No cipher, no initials, nothing clever, because she had never once imagined that anybody would read it. And that is what they never imagine, and that is how they are always caught. Ovid Pell, underclerk of the Chancery, keeper of the strong-room key, 11 payments, the last a large one, dated the day before. Bertrand Call, notary of the Prince's Chancery, Vantrev, 4 payments, and a 5th marked on delivery. Hussar asterisk, a salary quarterly and a note in the margin, asterisk for the floor, the press, the carriage, and the road asterisk. Dr. Ambrose Nye, physician, 3 payments, and against the 3rd, in her small clear hand, a memorandum that Sergeant Rook read aloud in the rain in a voice that did not change at all, and that I entered into the crossing ledger of Coldmark word for word, and that has since been read out in the High Court of Eldermore, and in the Council, and from the pulpit of every church in the realm. Certificate to be dated the 3rd of next month. Nothing before the 3rd. He is to be quite well until the 3rd. And the envelope, the ordinary, unsealed, cheap envelope, the last thing in the box, the thing you would throw away, held 1 sheet of a physician's paper, with a physician's letterhead, signed by Dr. Ambrose Nye, in which that gentleman certified, upon his oath and his honor, that he had that day examined His Majesty King Alaric, and found him of unsound mind and failing body, and unfit to govern. It was dated the 3rd of the following month. It was at that moment, standing in that van, the 12th. A doctor had signed a certificate about a day that had not happened yet. He had written down, in advance, in ink, the day the king would fall ill. Nobody said anything for a long time. The rain came down on the roof of the van. Somebody's motorcycle was still ticking as it cooled. Down under the bridge the Vess went on grinding its stones the way it has for 10,000 years, and it did not care, and it was the only thing there that did not. And then Lady Verena, sitting on the wet ramp with her hands over her mouth, said, through her fingers in a very small voice, to her mother, "You told me he was ill." Nobody answered her. "You told me," she said, "that he was already ill." And the Queen Consort of Eldermore, standing in the rain at the foot of the ramp of a wardrobe van at a mountain frontier with her hair down and her coat ruined, looked at her daughter, and did not say one word, and that silence is the only confession that woman ever made in her life. Sergeant Rook closed the lid. That is what told me, finally, what kind of man he was. He had the whole of it in his hands, the seal, the instrument, the book, the certificate with tomorrow's date on it. And he was standing over the woman who had broken his career and put him in the rain for 3 years, and he had won completely, in front of witnesses, and he could have said anything he liked. He closed the lid and stood up and said, "Corporal Locke, nobody touches this van. Trooper Kettle, the barrier stays down and the bridge is shut both ways. Inspector, I'm sorry, you'll have to walk home. Captain Thorne, sir, with your permission I'll take Mr. Sarr into custody on a charge of false declaration at a frontier, which is a matter for this post, and which I can prove out of the ledger." "Do it," said Thorne. Then Rook came down the ramp and stopped in front of her and took his cap off, which surprised me very much, and does still. "Ma'am, I have no power over your person. I'm a sergeant on a bridge. What I have is a closed crossing, a van that won't pass, and a ledger that says why. I'm sending for the warden of the marches, and she'll be 4 hours, and in that time nothing here moves. You're not under arrest, I can't arrest you, and I won't pretend I can. You're free to walk. But the bridge is shut. The road behind you is a single track with my captain's men on it, and the Vess is in flood, and there is nowhere in the world for you to be but here." He put his cap back on. "There's a fire in Master Crail's office," he said, "and he's got tea. Your daughter's cold, ma'am, take her in out of the rain." And she did. That is the last human thing I can record of her. She took her daughter's arm, and the 2 of them went into my office and sat by my stove, and I made them tea in my 2 cups, and nobody spoke, and after a while Lady Verena began to cry, and her mother sat looking at the wall. Princess Adela, warden of the marches, came down the valley at 20 minutes to 12, with 30 mounted troopers and the king's chancellor in a car behind her. She came into my office, did not sit, did not take off her wet gloves, and said, "Ledger." I gave it to her. She read the whole night standing, every entry from *2 minutes past 3 Lord Cassius, 1 motor car, empty, to *19 minutes past 7 chest opened. Contents entered severally as below. It took 11 minutes, and nobody in that room made a sound. Then she closed the book and put her hand flat on the cover, exactly the way Rook had put his hand flat on the bonnet of the car. "Master Crail, did anybody offer you anything to sign that book differently?" "Yes, ma'am, Mr. Sar, a chancery clerkship at Harrogate, grade 3. Princess Adela looked at me for a moment. "Grade 3, she said, "the insult of it." She turned to the chancellor. "Take the seal. 2 of my men on it at all times. It does not leave your hand between here and the strong room, and I want it in the council's sight before dark, because half the realm is going to be told this morning that we invented the whole thing." Then she went out and looked into the van for a long moment, and then she went and stood in front of the Queen Consort of Eldermore, who had come out of my office and was standing bareheaded in the rain, and the 2 women looked at each other, and there was 30 years in it. "The certificate is dated the 3rd, said Princess Adela. "It is a forgery," said Morwenna. "I have never seen it before." "It is in your box, under your floor in your van, with your seal press and your paper and your book of payments in your own hand," said Adela. "But that is not why I am going to see you finished. I am going to see you finished because I have just read what a doctor was paid to write about my brother, and I have read the date on it, and I know exactly what would have had to happen to him on the 3rd. And she turned her back on her and walked away, and that was the last time the 2 of them spoke without a court between them. The rest is the record, and the court has it, and I will set it down briefly because I have been asked to, and because a man should finish what he starts. Lord Cassius was taken at 12:30 on the crown of the King's Bridge, at the white line that marks the 2 realms. Inspector Hesper Dane walked him out of the yellow customs house and up over the hump of the bridge with a hand on his elbow, and stopped exactly at the line and let go, and said, "I heard him. I was at the barrier. That is your ground, sir, not mine. My prince sends his compliments to King Alaric and his very great regret, and begs to say that the chancery of Vantrev was not open this morning after all." And Cassius, who had a fur collar and a very fine hat, and had sat in the warm since 3 o'clock waiting to be handed a box, walked the last 90 feet into Eldermore on his own legs, into 30 mounted men. The notary Bertrand Call was expelled from Vantrev within the week, and the prince sent the Concord of the 2 rivers back to Harrogate with a note asking that Article 9 be looked at again. It has been, and it is mended. No instrument of the realm may now be registered abroad unless it is first entered in the chancery at home. That is the one good thing that woman did for Eldermore, and she did it by accident. Underclerk Ovid Pell confessed in about 4 minutes. He had carried the seal out of the strong room on the 9th in a bag of laundry and had been sick with terror ever since, and I am told he wept when they came for him and said, "Thank God," and then would not stop talking for 2 days. Crown Prince Rowan was recalled from the Northern Progress by wire and reached Harrogate on the 14th, and it was he who broke the last of it, clean, careful, unglamorous work, and I have always liked him for it. He asked the Chancery for the warrant stock book, because every sheet of that cream, gilt-edged, portcullis watermarked paper is numbered in pencil on the back before it is issued, and every sheet is signed for. The instrument of regency was engrossed on sheet 1114. Sheet 1114 had been signed out on the 9th to Underclerk Ovid Pell, for fair copies. Then the Crown Prince did the thing nobody had thought of. He asked for the King's signing book for the 10th, and he counted. On the 10th, King Alaric had sat for 50 minutes and signed 106 routine instruments, pardons, commissions, a harbor master, a market charter. The book said 106. His private secretary's tally in the margin said 106. But the sheets, counted, came to 107, and the 107th was a blank leaf of scrap, laid at the bottom of the pile to make the numbers agree. A pile of paper. A man signing at the end of a long morning at 1 every 28 seconds, without reading, because they were pardons, because they had been read for him, because that is how a king signs 100 routine things. And one sheet of vellum, 6 from the bottom, 3/4 covered by the sheet above it, so that all he ever saw was a blank strip and a line. That is all it took, that is all it ever takes. King Alaric was told on the 15th. I was not there. Princess Adela told me afterwards because I asked her at a moment when I had earned the right to ask, and she told me the truth, and I will put it down as she gave it to me. She said they brought him the whole of it, and he read it in order and said nothing through the instrument, and nothing through the book of payments, and nothing through Pell's confession. Then they gave him the envelope with the physician's certificate in it, and he read it and looked at the date and was quiet for a while. Then he asked, "What day is it today?" And they told him. And he said, "So I have 3 weeks," and put the paper down on the table and both hands over his face, and his sister sent everybody out of the room. She was tried before the High Court of Eldermore in the spring for counterfeiting the authority of the crown, which our law calls treason by instrument. She pleaded not guilty. She was very good in the box, and for 2 days I thought she would walk out of that court and back into the palace. Then they put the crossing ledger in front of the judges. Not me, the book. They read it out in order in that huge quiet room. *202 Lord Cassius 1 motorcar empty. 4.11 Convoy halted at the tonnage stone. 4.34 Writ of free passage produced, defective. Countersign of the Deputy Chamberlain only, no sign manual, retained. 4.52 Van wardrobe declared 3 tons 6 CWT, weighed 4 tons 17 CWT. 6.06 Van empty, weighed 2 tons 13 CWT. Screws 68, chests 41. The seal taken up whole, and then the entries in that other handwriting, the shaky one, the one that is mine and is not mine. When it was finished, the Lord Chief Justice said that in 40 years he had never seen a case proved so completely out of an account book, kept by a man who did not know what he was writing down, that the realm owed its constitution to a weighbridge, and that if the frontier officers of Eldermore had been in the habit of making exceptions for great persons, there would have been no realm left to try her in. She was convicted on all counts, stripped of the style and dignity of queen consort by act of council and of all rank, precedence and revenue, her estates forfeit, and confined for the remainder of her life at a house in the far north, where she lives yet, well fed, well warmed, well guarded and forgotten, which she would tell you herself is the worst of it. Lord Cassius was convicted with her. Quillan Sar was convicted at the assize on my ledger and on nothing else. Dr. Ambrose Nye was struck from the roll of physicians and imprisoned, and has never offered any explanation at all, which is somehow the most frightening thing in the whole business. Lady Verena was charged with nothing, because she had done nothing, and she gave her evidence plainly, and it cost her everything she had. Princess Adela took her into her own household afterwards, over a good deal of noise, and said one sentence about it in public, which was, "The girl was 17 and she was lied to by her mother, and if this realm proposes to punish people for that, it had better build more prisons." They came for us in the summer. There was a levy at Harrogate. The king made Captain Idris Thorne a major and gave him the Marchward Company. Corporal Peth Locke and Trooper Ants Kettle each had the Marchward Medal and a year's pay. And Inspector Hesper Dane of the Vantrev Customs was given the freedom of the realm and a pipe of tobacco a month for life, which he asked for himself, having refused everything else. And they offered me a chancery clerkship at Harrogate, grade 1, not grade 3, warm rooms and a pension that is not a joke. I said no. I said it badly, and I heard myself say something foolish about the damp, and the king let me finish and then asked me why. And I said, "Sir, if I go, they will put a younger man on the tonnage stone, and he will want to get on. And one night somebody very grand will come down out of the pass in a hurry, and he will think about his career for half a second, and that will be enough. I'd rather stay and be the old fool who weighs the king." There was a silence. I thought I had ruined myself for the second time in a year. Then King Alaric said, "Yes, stay and be that," and he shook my hand, and that was the whole of it, and I have never wanted anything else since. Sergeant Halden Rook was restored to sergeant major and offered the inner guard back, his old post, the palace, the best posting in the realm, the one she took from him for the sake of a locked door. He asked to stay at Coldmark. He said it in front of the whole levy, in that flat way he has, as though reading it off a board, that the bridge was the way out of the realm, and somebody had better be standing on it, and he had got used to the rain. So they gave him both. He is Sergeant Major Rook now, and Warden of the King's Bridge, an office that did not exist until they invented it for him, and he has a house with a chimney that draws and 110 men to train, and he still comes out at 4 in the morning when the lamps come down out of the pass, because he does not think it right that a man should be paid for a post he does not stand. The bridge law was not changed. The council debated making it stricter, arming the frontier officers with powers of search and suspicion and discretion. Princess Adela stood up and said that the law had worked precisely because it gave nobody any discretion at all, that a sergeant with a right to search would have searched and been broken for it, and that what had saved the realm was 4 flat lines that made no exceptions and asked no questions and could not be argued with, and a man who would not step 1 inch off them. They left it alone. The board is still above my desk. The paint is still peeling off the second line. I am nearly done. The court has asked whether I wish to add anything of my own, and I do, and then I will stop. In November, on the last fine day of the year, a black motor car came down the marchway with no standard on it and no escort, and it came up to the barrier at Coldmark, and it stopped, and it waited. I came out with the ledger. Sergeant Major Rook came out of the guard hut and stood at the barrier. And the King of Eldermore put his window down and said, "Waymaster, I want to cross into Vantrev for the afternoon. I'm told there's a fair." And I said, "Every wheel weighs, sir." And he said, "Yes, I know." So he drove his own car up onto the tonnage stone, and I went in and read the dial and came out and wrote it in the book, and I have the entry in front of me now, at the top of the page in my own hand, and it is the last thing I will put into this deposition, because it is the only summing up I know how to make. 14 November 1 motorcar, His Majesty, 2 tons 4 CWT, declared 2 tons 4 CWT passed. The same as June, the same as it will be next year and the year after that. 2 tons 400 weight, and no exceptions and a signature, and up goes the barrier. That is all the realm is, in the end. It is not the palace and it is not the seal, though I have held the seal in my 2 hands and my knees gave under me. It is a rule that is the same for the man in the black car as it is for the wool lorry, and a book that gets written in whether anybody is watching or not, and somewhere at the end of a wet road at 4 in the morning, one man who has been told what will happen to him if he does his job, and who steps out from under the lamp anyway, and puts his open hand flat on the bonnet. The car stops. They always stop. Simon Crail, clerk and weighmaster of the Coldmark crossing, in his own hand and true.